coming at you from my dark closet and my tiny apartment. This is In the Tank Podcast, episode 244. We're going to be talking about socialism, climate change, coronavirus, the standard stuff on episode 244 of the In the Tank Podcast. As always, I am Donald Kendal. Joined by, we've got Justin Haskins, editorial director at the Heartland Institute. What's going on, sir?
I'm doing very well, Donald. Thanks again for having me on the show.
That's right. Jim Lakely, you haven't paid up recently, but you're still on the show. VP of the Heartland Institute. How are you, sir?
I'm great. I'm coming to you from the Andrew Breitbart Freedom Center here at the Heartland Institute. I've tried to set up a little bit of a rigging here with lights. I don't know if it's working right yet. We'll get it perfected, but I am not in front of a green screen. This is actually...
Yeah, don't believe him. That's a green screen.
Nope.
Go shake one of those flags. I don't buy it. Buy it. You're sitting in your office.
Go hug it. Don't shake it. Hug one of those flags.
And while he's doing that, I'll say that also in a dark corner of his apartment is Andy, our producer extraordinaire. He'll hit us with one of those tasty sound bites at some point during this. And also joining us is Isaac Orr, policy fellow at the Center of the American Experiment. No camera today. Isaac, how's it going? Oh, radio, folks. This is splendiferous to be on your podcast. Justin, don't laugh at me. You're a trash human. Coal and such. Thanks, Isaac. All right. Oh, you got to go? Okay, bye. Yeah. Sorry. Isaac couldn't stay with us, so he just had that little intro that he wanted to do. So folks, I'm losing it, man. This is like, 2.5 months into this lockdown? I'm losing it.
Wait a minute. There was a lockdown? What are you talking about? I just like staying inside, not going anywhere or doing anything.
I'm losing it, man. I'm losing it. My sanity is gone, folks. So yeah, we're just gonna go over some of the same stuff that we've been talking about: climate change, coronavirus, socialism, the trifecta, I should say. But before we get into any of that, I wanted to have a conversation with you guys about Elon Musk. Because he has been kind of a source of confusion for me as of late. I've always been kind of a fan of Elon Musk. So before I get into any of the recent developments, what are your guys' kind of baseline thoughts on this man? Go with you, Jim.
I don't really think about Elon Musk a lot, to be honest with you. I think it's pretty cool that he's going to be kind of like the first private man in space, or the first private space program where humans are going up. That's happening, I think, in a few days from now. Look, this guy is, he's a self-made man. I think he'll go down in history. The history books will write that he probably will stand among the top 20 industrialists in American history. A lot of his fortune has been built, through Tesla and the, subsidies the government gives for, to help support his company, for people to buy product and kind of help, all because, supposedly a Tesla is more green than than an SUV somewhere. So, just putting all that aside, the man, I've actually watched a couple of podcasts with him on the Joe Rogan Experience, Joe Rogan's podcast. And I watch the podcast a lot anyway. And it was at the prompting of Nathan, one of the guys in our development, Nathan Myers, because he's a big fan of Elon Musk and Joe Rogan. So we said, this is a really interesting conversation. So I started watching it on a weekend, and I just started to fall asleep. And I got about 20 minutes in, fell asleep, woke up an hour later, and they were still talking. And that's the nature of his program. It's a 3-hour interview, and there's really nobody doing better interviews these days than Joe Rogan. So that big deal, $100 million deal he just signed with Spotify was well earned. But I couldn't get over the fact that it takes work to follow what Elon Musk is saying. Not because he was born in South Africa and has an accent, but because it is, he just talks so slowly and takes lots of time between words and sentences.
Wait. So Isaac,
Elon Musk sucks. Everything about him sucks, and I can't believe that you like him, Donnie. I'm sitting in a Walgreens parking lot waiting for a prescription, but Elon Musk sucks. All he does is get subsidized. That's all he does is look for new and creative ways to get subsidized. He just, I don't know if I can say this on the podcast, but he just honey dicks people all the time. You can bleep that out if you need to. I can say, B nectar phallus if you would prefer. Man, all he's done is he's burned every bridge that he ever could, and he's basically just used all the people that, all the libs that love electric cars. He's just been using them this whole time. And now he needs Republican support in order to get more subsidies for his super expensive cars that don't work when it's cold outside. And now he's trying to pretend that he's on their side just so he can just saddle up to the trough one more time. Don't buy it. Never Elon.
Okay, well, Isaac jumping in for that. That was great, Isaac. And to your credit, so I was starting to look
I can't
up.
hear what Donnie's saying.
Well, everyone else can. So to your credit, I was looking up kind of like Heartland Institute and Elon Musk to kind of see what the stories were that we've written about him in the past, and a lot of them are reflecting kind of what Isaac's talking about.
Oh yeah,
the over subsidization, all of that. So then I was seeing like, is that like, is that in the past or is that kind of still continuing? It seems like it's a still continuing thing. I found this article from The Verge that basically says that Musk is basically in the process of doing a bake-off, quote unquote, which is similar to the process that like Bezos was doing with Amazon, where he was trying to get all of these different states and localities to kind of give their best offer for like why he should put the HQ2 in their, neck of the woods or whatever. So it seems like Musk is doing that right now. And apparently some of the finalists include Austin, Texas, Tulsa, Oklahoma, Nashville, Tennessee. And they're all putting together these incentive packages to make it, worthy of Musk putting his like new manufacturing plant in one of these locations. So it still seems like he's trying to get as much of the subsidies as possible from the government. So that's kind of the argument against him. Justin, I mean, where are you on this? Are you sympathetic to him a little bit? You not like him so much? What's up?
So I think he's brilliant. I think that's sort of unquestionable. But I agree that he's so I think to understand him, you have to understand that he's not driven by sort of a consistent ideology in the traditional, left-right spectrum. I just don't think he falls anywhere on that. I think on certain things, he's really anti-authoritarian. I think on other things, he's totally willing to take government money and blow it on stuff that, really is not a very good use of taxpayers' dollars. I think that there's an element of that that's a little corrupt, I think. I think anyone who takes money and makes a promise that he knows that he can't keep. So, for example, when you say that you're going to run you're going to build Teslas and that Teslas are going to allow people to, have this green energy future, when you know that most power plants across the country are still being, supported by coal and natural gas and things like that, and that really this is not a form of green energy as you're selling it. There's a little bit of dishonesty there without question. But at the same time, I think that he has sort of an anti-authoritarian streak in him, and he is an individualistic guy, and he's hyper creative and a very unique person. And so I think he's interesting, I guess is what I would say. Yeah. I think we have to get out of this habit of, labeling everybody a good guy and a bad guy, because in certain circumstances, people just are not political enough really for us to do that fairly. And I think he's one of those people, and he's showing that now.
So I bring this up because, he's kind of making headlines and heads explode recently with his recent tweets and public statements. He seems to be very vocal with his criticisms about these lockdowns over coronavirus. He recently tweeted, "Free America Now." A follower of Musk responded to that tweet saying the scariest thing about the pandemic is not the virus itself, it's seeing Americans so easily bow down and give up their blood-bought freedom to corrupt politicians who promise them safety. To which Elon Musk responded, "True." And then also he's in like the middle of a dispute between local California government and not allowing his manufacturing plant to open. So he threatened to move his manufacturing plant to Texas, basically to spite California. So all of these things have kind of I don't know, seemingly like, oh, is he not just completely buying the left's line on everything? And then even more recently, he had a couple of tweets. One, cancel culture, which again, that's not necessarily like a coronavirus specific thing. He tweeted more fun, less shun. And then he also tweeted, take the red pill. So Jim, I mean, I think that if Isaac didn't drop off, he'd say that this is just some kind of publicity stunt to get the people on the right side of the aisle to kind of buy his shtick. Do you think he actually took the red pill here? I don't know.
I think he did. I mean, maybe I took too long to get around to it, but I was going to mention that if you listen to him being interviewed by Joe Rogan, he just did an interview, I think last week, and then there was one just a few weeks earlier. And, for lack of a better way to identify him, he really is very libertarian in many ways. I mean, he likes smoking pot. I'm sure he's against the criminalization of drugs. He's very freedom centered. And that came through in the discussions that he was having with Joe Rogan. So I was not surprised at all to see him, tweet, take the red pill and talk about freedom and liberty. He really appreciates the fact that the United States as a freedom-based society with a constitution that guarantees those freedoms, with a capitalist system that is generally allows, with less regulation, especially under Trump, that allows, the free movement of capital. He really appreciates that about the United States. It seems to have him do that from Silicon Valley is a little bit unusual. Everybody in Silicon Valley is hard to the left. That's where Hillary Clinton raised a ton of money in 2016. That's where Nancy Pelosi represents. The culture of all companies in Silicon Valley are leftist. They're very much into social justice. They're very much into contributing to lots of left-wing groups around the country. Elon Musk sticks out, and he sticks out like a sore thumb in Silicon Valley because he doesn't buy into all that stuff. He knows that, it's hard to put aside the amount of subsidies that Elon Musk has taken. And as a libertarian free market organization, the Heartland Institute wants every company to rise and fall on their own merits, whether the product is good or not, whether it's affordable to make, and all of that without having the government pick Tesla as the winner of the electric car contest. That's what happened. And that's very much unfortunate and not something that we support. But as Justin said, he is a very creative person. He's a creative thinker. And if you put that aside, what he has done is he appreciates the fact that liberty and freedom allow him to do what he does, that allow him to create these new products, not just the cars, but, the SpaceX program, the, battery technology advances. All of these things are good. And you need liberty to be able to do those things. You can't have government directing how these things happen. And he's a freedom absolutist. There's very few of those people in industry, especially in Silicon Valley. And so when I see these things, one, I'm happy about it. Two, I'm not all that surprised because I listen to Joe Rogan. And three, I want more of it. The more that Elon Musk pisses off the leftists in Silicon Valley, the better it'll be, because they, even if they don't like what he tweeted, they admire him. He's probably the most respected and admired man in Silicon Valley outside of, well, I'm sure he's actually more respected than Mark Zuckerberg. So this is a very good thing. And maybe they will start to think to themselves, hey, you know what? Maybe liberty is important. Maybe Gavin Newsom needs to let us open up our factories as well. Maybe we should threaten to move to Texas so that we can, operate as a normal country again in California.
Right. Yeah, there's a little bit of me that could be sympathetic to him, like, taking subsidies, because, like, that's just kind of like what's allowed to him by law, no matter how bad that law is or whatever. But like that one story that I was just kind of talking about, where he's just basically shopping around his manufacturing plant to see how much government support he can get, it loses me a little bit there. But yeah, generally speaking, I like him. I hope that he continues to take that red pill, which is obviously a reference to Andy's favorite movie, The Matrix. And quickly, because I'm on that subject, I want to mention another Joe Rogan thing that happened recently, which is he had Patton Oswalt on, who's like the comedian, right? And Patton Oswalt, during this interview with Joe Rogan, was literally making the case for people taking the blue pill, which would be staying in the Matrix, because in his opinion, ignorance is bliss. And why would you want to like suffer in the real world when you could be happy in the fake world? which is like a caricature of what conservatives try to paint like liberals as. Like he's literally saying that we should take the blue pill. So I just wanted to put that out there because I thought it was hilarious. But yeah, so let's move on to our real topics here, which is another week in the world of coronavirus. Jim, I asked you like a month ago if I should find my non-sweatpants. You said I should, so I did. A month has gone by and I haven't needed them. So thanks for that bad advice. Illinois seemingly is ramping up to maybe go into phase 3, which is in reality phase 1 of reopening. They just call it phase 3, so it seems like we have some type of progress going on here. It could be about 2 weeks away, maybe the end of May. Some of our stores might be reopening, so I don't know. Take that with a grain of salt. But one of the things that some people were promoting as a positive that's come about all of this coronavirus, if you're on Twitter, which don't, it's a cesspool, it's terrible. But on trending on Monday or Tuesday was a story about how coronavirus lockdowns have caused a whopping 17% drop in global carbon emissions. It says the coronavirus lockdowns have had an extreme effect on daily carbon emissions, causing a whopping 17% drop globally during peak confinement measures by early April, levels last seen in 2006. So, Justin, I would think that environmentalists and climate change kind of alarmists are thinking like, wow, we can cause CO2 levels to drop. You know, if only we lock ourselves down. So should they be considering this a victory?
I think some of them, I don't know if I would say that they're calling it a victory or if they think of it as a victory so much as they think of it as a trial run for what's next, right? I think that that's really what's going on here to some extent. I think that there are many people on the left who believe adamantly that, or at least they're promoting this belief adamantly, that the world is facing an existential crisis, that humanity is facing an existential crisis, that humanity may not survive another 50, 60, 70 years, maybe a century or something like that, because of climate change. And as a result of that, they are promoting some extremely radical ideas. They've been doing this now for more than a decade. And I think they see what's happening right now as proof that you can actually do this. You can shut down massive amounts of the economy. It is possible. You can have the government print trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars that it doesn't have. You can just send people checks in the mail and just support an entire society of people. They believe that these things are not necessarily bad, but actually necessary. And I think the more you listen to people on the far left talk, not just radicals at like Mother Jones and Salon and places like that, but you actually listen to leaders talk about what they see going forward. The more you hear things like, we can't go back to normal. We have to take this opportunity to do something different. We have to reshape our society, reshape our economies, reshape our world. This is all coded language, or in some cases, not so coded language for let's use the coronavirus crisis as a way forward to get us to the socialist, communist, whatever world whoever depends on who you're talking to, but a socialist, communist world that we've been looking for all this time. Except we know the coronavirus crisis isn't going to last forever. But guess what? We've got this other great crisis called climate change. And so we'll just slip climate change right into this thing after the coronavirus thing dies out. And we'll have a whole new reason to take over the entire economy. And I really think that that's what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, so to that point of the 17% drop, some group of academics did some kind of further analysis and said that, like, basically when everything kind of ramps back up by the end of the year, this might turn out to be just a 4% reduction in CO2 emissions. So, probably can't spike the football too much when it comes to that, environmental lefties. But this kind of talk and this kind of stuff that's happened in the lockdowns has caused one writer for the New York Post to write that if you like the lockdown United States, you'll love the Green New Deal. And basically makes the case, kind of what Justin, you were just saying, that the lockdowns is a taste of things to come. under plans like the Green New Deal specifically, and more generally just kind of the agenda of people like AOC, restrictions in air travel, shortages of meat production. So, Jim, do you think that this is an apt analogy?
Yeah, I think we've been saying this for a while, that if you like the lockdown, you're going to love the Green New Deal, because all of the economic suffering that we are experiencing right now would be permanent. Me commuting here from my place of, from my home to this place of work is only about an 8-mile ride. So it's not very far. And I'm already noticing some more cars on the road, even though things haven't been lifted here in Illinois. We're still imprisoned, supposedly, in our homes. I escape and then go back to prison every day, I guess. But, we're starting to see more people on the road. So this idea that, we can continue this low level of CO2 emissions, if you care about that, I don't. Most people don't, because it doesn't have that huge effect on the environment. But if you care about these things and you want to make them permanent, that means basically everybody that's unemployed right now will have to stay unemployed for the most part, because not everybody can work from home. I was watching, I think it was Tucker Carlson the other night, and he had somebody on who was talking about how the United States, we used to have lots of manufacturing jobs. Now we're having some comeback during the Trump administration, and that's good, but not nearly at the scale that we had in the 60s and 70s. We had a lot more. We had a bigger manufacturing base then. Well, all of our manufacturing, for the most part, a lot of it, especially the stuff from Silicon Valley, speaking of Elon Musk, at least he builds his Teslas here in the United States. But a lot of that tech manufacturing has moved over to China. A lot of other manufacturing, textile manufacturing, has moved over to China, has been there for quite a while. So now when something like this happens and there's a big lockdown, we don't have a manufacturing base anymore. We're basically a service economy now. But when nobody can go outside, when nobody can do anything, when nobody can get in their cars and go to a store, when nobody can get in their cars and go to a restaurant or go to a concert or do anything, the service economy absolutely collapses. That's why there's 33 million people unemployed. One of the big reasons is a lot of those people are in service jobs, and those service jobs are probably not going to come back, at least not all of them, certainly not all of them. And so the economic pain we're feeling now would be permanent under the Green New Deal, because there would be such restrictions on economic activity. This would be the new normal. I find it amazing that the environmental left, and I keep seeing stories like this, and you mentioned it too. We sent them to each other via text and email all week, how the environmental left thinks this is a good thing. They think this is their opportunity to do what they've wanted to do, not realizing that most of America is horrified at what's happening right now. They are depressed. They can't believe this. They want to go back to normal. So the idea that this is an opportunity for the environmental left to implement their agenda is completely backwards. This is the death knell, I think, of the environmental movement, the extreme environmental movement, the Green New Deal, all of it. If they want to run on it, go ahead. You're running on misery, permanent misery for people who have suffered more than they ever thought they could.
Well, let's open that up, because I think that's kind of debatable. I have people, friends, family that are out of work because of all of this stuff. And they're making basically as much money as they were prior to this because of the increase in unemployment. And maybe they're making slightly less money than they would be if they were working. But the trade-off is they don't have to spend 40 hours a week at work. And they could spend the rest of their time doing whatever they want. So I've got some friends and some family that are enjoying this. So I don't know. I think that while you're saying that this could be like a death knell of this type of like agenda or whatever, I don't know. Maybe some people are actually adapting to this and being like, you know what? I could spend my time doing something more enjoyable than, serving somebody at work. Justin, what do you think?
I think it depends on the person. I think it depends on the community. I think it depends on the ideology of the group of people that you're talking about. But I kind of lean in the direction of Donnie for a lot of people. And I think the left is banking on that. I think they're banking on the idea that there are a lot of people out there who, once they get a taste of universal basic income, which is essentially what many of these programs are, they're not going to want to go back. That's why all of these proposals that Democrats have put forward are all about expanding universal basic income, essentially,
right,
for people who are unemployed. So it's not universal, but basic income programs for people who are unemployed for as long as they possibly can. That's why they're trying to get the numerous provisions that they're trying to put in place now for student debt relief and stuff like that in place for the next 16 months or some ungodly thing. It's because if they can just get it in place long enough that people become used to it, well, then it becomes almost like an entitlement. Now forcing people to go back to work isn't a benefit, it isn't a privilege. It's bad. It's negative. Who the heck wants to go back to work if they don't have to? I think there are some communities that will always want to go back to work and hate the fact that this is happening. But I think there are plenty of communities out there who are completely happy with this going on. And so I think it depends quite a bit. America's a very diverse place, and I think it depends based on your pre-existing ideology is what I'm saying, I guess.
Well, AOC, this is just a few weeks ago, although I have no sense of time anymore because of all this coronavirus stuff, so it could have been even longer ago. But AOC was saying, like, yeah, when we can go back to work, we shouldn't. We should do like a worker strike and demand higher wages and better working conditions or whatever she had to say. So I don't know, Jim, rebuttal?
Rebuttal, golly. People want to go to work. I mean, I guess me and Justin don't entirely agree, although I think Justin also agrees with me a little bit, which is I'll take it, considering the last few podcasts. But look, the American people want to go to work for the most part. We had basically what's called full employment. When unemployment goes below 4%, you basically have what they call full employment. There's 4% of the working population that doesn't want to work. Fine. That's the normal state of being. Plenty of jobs for everyone. I think most people do want to go back to work. I think it is very dangerous to something that Justin said, to keeping unemployment benefits, boosting them and then keeping them going indefinitely for this. But, as for AOC, it's like not everybody can work from home. One of the hallmarks of the Green New Deal, as Justin and Donnie, both of you know very well, is high density housing and huge expansions of public transportation, as if the whole world lives in New York, between New York City and Washington, D.C., and that this is a practical way of living for everyone. It's not a practical way of living for everyone. And if the coronavirus is with us forever and is even half as bad and dangerous and deadly as we've been sold, and I don't think it is, but if it is, because that's the point they are making, you can't have people living on top of each other, taking public transportation, and also stay 6 feet apart, and keep everybody safe. The contradictions among for the Green New Deal and economic activity, I mean, it's a fantasy pie in the sky sort of thing. I mean, the whole thing, the Green New Deal, we've made fun of it on this podcast for more than a year. It's as if it was written, as a thing of fiction. None of these things can actually really happen because they practically can't happen just technologically. But if you apply the logic and what they want to do to society right now with coronavirus, we're all going to die. we're too close together. One of the pictures that actually exemplifies this that I saw on the internet the other day was people queuing up to go into a subway train. I think it was in some Asian country, I believe, but they were standing 6 feet apart while queuing up to get into a subway train where they were all packed together like this. And it's like, it's insane. You can't have these things. It's a pretend world to think that we can all live and have to take public transportation. The safest place you can be during a pandemic like this is your own vehicle. And I see people driving around their vehicles with the masks on their face. Who you got to infect, man? It's only you in the car.
So I think the point is that, like, once the disease kind of goes away, this virus goes away, they're still going to have all the excuses up their sleeve to continue on with these, give everybody basically a universal basic income. So whether their excuse is high levels of unemployment or climate change or disruption with the economy or whatever, I think the larger point is that, like, they're going to get these people hooked on this stuff, this handouts from the government. This Heroes Act that Justin was writing about, that is another round of the stimulus. There was other proposals that Justin and I were talking about that is like basically a universal basic income for the foreseeable future. And one of the proposals, I don't know if this is included in that, Justin, you can correct me, but there was a proposal that basically said that they were going to have some triggers in place that if these triggers are triggered, then that would automatically initiate some type of new monthly stipend for everybody. that's affected by whatever the trigger is. And one of them was an unemployment rate above X amount. So, let's take coronavirus out of that. Are these proposals that are being put in place, are we creating the precedent to keep them here forever?
Yeah. I think we are. And I think in the past, look, I think really what has changed is that in the past, there was always this very strong sense among a very large group of people in the United States. And depending on how far back you go, it was a larger group, right? I mean, lately it's gotten smaller, but there's always been this sense that, well, you can't just infinitely spend money. So even if we wanted to have some sort of universal basic income program or whatever, we can't afford it.
Yeah.
It's just not possible. But that's all been thrown out the window. The idea that you can't afford something is now non-existent. Nobody cares about that. No one even believes in it anymore. It's just print as much money as you possibly want. Trillions and trillions of dollars. It doesn't even matter. They're spending, they're going to be, $5, $6, $7 trillion over budget this year. Like that's very likely to happen. Right. I mean, that's insane. That would have been unthinkable 10 years ago. Unthinkable. And now you're going to have a year where you are going to be $5, $6, $7, $8 trillion over budget in a single year. So that rule is flown out the window. And Jim, you mentioned earlier, well, we just had full employment, right? So people obviously want to work, but that's because they had to work, right? That's the big difference. They had to work. Now they don't have to work. It doesn't matter anymore. As long as you keep providing people with the unemployment, they don't need to work. And many people, they actually did a study. I can't remember. It was an analyst that used to work at the Treasury Department, and he did a study. It was published. It was referenced in a New York Times article that I just saw the other day, that he looked at the unemployment benefits that people are getting now when you combine the $600 a week bonus that people are getting who are unemployed. You add that to state unemployment. And I think it was 48 states, I think it was all but 12, people get more money in unemployment benefits than they actually got while they were working. In 48 states, in 38 states, it was all but 12. So 38 states. I mean, think about that. Why would you ever go back to work? And even before, when we were talking about, 3% unemployment or something, I mean, it's true that there was 3% unemployment, but that doesn't mean that only 3% of people were unwilling to work. Even those 3%, by definition, were considered to be actively looking for work, but just hadn't found it yet. If you don't look for work actively, you're not even counted as unemployed. So the truth is that the real number of people who are unemployed is much, much higher than 3%. So there was a large chunk of people who didn't want to work and weren't working and were living off of the welfare state. I don't know what that percentage is. I'm sure there's people who've done estimates of that, but that number is getting larger and larger and larger because the benefits are so significant now. And so unless you turn off those benefits, all they would have to do is get rid of the $600 bonus at some point, phase that out. And then all of a sudden people are getting much less money than they had before. And now they're going to be encouraged to go back to work once economies start opening. But what Democrats want to do in the HEROES Act that you just proposed, which is a ludicrous name, by the way, they want to extend the $600 weekly bonus all the way through January 2021 with an option to extend it to March 2021. So they're going to be providing people with $600 extra for almost a whole year for people who are unemployed. That's more than $30,000 in some cases. If you started right from the very beginning, almost $30,000 in extra unemployment, not counting the state unemployment benefits that you're getting. So this is an insane and just completely ridiculous way of doing things. The one reason why I think it may not stay in place forever is the timeline that they've proposed, I think tells you something. So in their legislation, they're saying they want to extend the $600 bonus until the end of January 2021. Now, what happens at the end of January 2021? Well, if Joe Biden becomes president, that's when he becomes president. That's when he takes office. So suddenly, everyone has to go back to work. It's right when Joe Biden becomes president. That's a miracle. Unemployment is all of a sudden, there's going to be all these people who are going to go out looking for jobs. The economy is going to skyrocket right as Joe Biden becomes president. So that actually tells you that maybe they're not looking to put this in place forever just yet. Maybe they're just setting it up so that Joe Biden looks fantastic if he actually wins the election and becomes president.
How dare you?
Yeah, but I do think that eventually this is the plan. And I think that you'll have climate change as an excuse, any kind of natural disaster, anything bad that happens, another pandemic, whatever it is. From now on, this whole situation has normalized this kind of behavior. So from now on, anything that can be used as an excuse for doing this, I think the left, if they have the ability to do it, is going to try to do it. And because they control the media, I think it might be effective unless we can stop this right now. I mean, we really have to turn things around right now, or else I really do think that we're going to lose millions and millions of people to this addiction of just getting free money from the government.
Yeah, I mean,
stop the hammering out there. Who's got a hammer?
Totally relevant. Anyways, so Justin, I am in complete agreement with you on this. It seems to me like the debate that's going on like social media is basically a bunch of people that are saying like all those that, don't want these restrictions are just idiots that just want to get their hair cut or whatever. And by the way, Jim, you need a haircut. Anyways, but like in reality, like I think there would be a lot more pressure to get back to normal, quote unquote, if we didn't have these constant injections of morphine, economic morphine into our veins looking like $600 a week or whatever a month in unemployment bonus and all these stimulus checks. So, Jim, I mean, has the idea of saying something's too expensive gone out the door when we're talking about having like debt, a yearly deficit of like $7 trillion? Like, it seems like it's just like not even a winning argument anymore.
Yeah, it's really hard to make the fiscal responsible, the fiscally responsible government argument these days. Both sides for a long time have spent whatever they felt like and just borrowed, and don't really worry about it because the fiscal calamity that is always predicted never comes. Decades go by. We're borrowing too much. We're spending too much. And fiscal calamity for the government never comes. This is actually going to really test that theory. I don't think you can spend $7 trillion above what you were already going to spend, the $2 trillion, whatever you were already going to spend this year, spend another $5 or $7 trillion over that and have it have no effect on the economy, no effect on the government's ability to do other things, to try to be fiscally responsible, to try to start to pay down the debt. It is very depressing in that regard. But as far as I like that analogy, Donnie, with injecting morphine into the economy, keeping everybody asleep, keeping everybody down. Look, the HEROES Act has, as Justin said, it's ridiculously named. Heroes, and in reality, well, not reality, but the idea is that it's named after the heroes. And what are the heroes doing right now? Your nurses, your doctors, your EMTs, your grocery store owners, your other people. They're working. Heroes are working. I think this is such a cynical bill. This is such a cynical idea that people want to lay down and just take the minimum amount to survive. Just take morphine and lie back every day and wait for the next injection of morphine to keep me asleep. I think that very much misses what the American people are all about and what they want to do. They want to work. They want to achieve. It is a human need to be able to find reward in your work. There are no, every job has worth in the society. We cannot recover if we continue paying people to not work. We will never thrive as a society if you're rewarded for not working. This has to be temporary. People are going to want to get back to work. They want to be able to help get this country back together, because if you're not working, that means then the person who might have hired you probably doesn't have his business. The economy is very complicated. Everything is interconnected. That's what makes all of these shutdowns so almost evil, really. I think they are evil, and they're arbitrary by these governors. For instance, in Minnesota, restaurants will be able to open very soon to 50 people, but churches still cannot have more than 10 congregants in them. I believe the bishops of Minnesota have now sued the governor, telling them that, and actually they've actually even announced, we're not abiding by this. We're letting as many people come in and socially distance as they want and come and attend mass. And you can't stop us from doing this because this is a First Amendment right of exercise, free exercise of religion. And it's these arbitrary rules that just come out of absolutely nowhere and can change on the spot because the governor feels like changing it, is what makes all of this so insidious. And I think people are starting to realize that, and they want to go back to normal. And going back to normal means going to work, because working is better than laying back and just taking morphine. I have a little bit more, I guess, more hope in that America wants to work than perhaps Justin does. And I hope I'm right.
Yeah, I guess we'll see. I think that there's going to be a bigger push on the left for things like universal basic income, just kind of make that a permanent thing instead of a thing in terms of crisis or whatever. But I guess we'll see, and we'll continue to kind of push those policy battles to push back against some of these ideas that basically are just ushering us towards a socialism. Justin, I do want to talk about the one thing that the article that you were reading about this morning about the global reset, because I think that this has some potential implications about what the kind of the larger agenda is here about pushing our society in one direction versus another. So tell us about this article.
Yeah, so there's this great article in Axios this morning that talked about this meeting that's going to occur with high-level politicians, bankers, and business leaders from across the entire world on June 3rd. This just came out today. Essentially, the meeting is going to be predominantly focused on economics, but not just economics, also how climate change and economics are impacted by what's going on with COVID-19 and what they're going to do in the future. And the quotes from some of the sources, all of whom are unnamed, by the way, in the story are very, very interesting. One of them said, this is a spokesperson for the event, for the meeting. The meeting will see various guests from the public and private sector make contributions on how we can achieve a, quote, great reset of our global economic system in the post-COVID era. And then another person said, when the public health emergency recedes, meaning the COVID-19 public health emergency, the obvious biggest crisis you have to address is climate change. The understanding of this group, meaning the one that's meeting, is that this public health crisis reveals that you also have an enormous social and economic crisis in terms of inequity. And among the people who are going to be at this meeting are Prince Charles, Klaus Schwab, who's the executive chairman of the World Economic Forum. They're co-hosting it, by the way, those two. You have the managing director of the International Monetary Fund. You have the president and CEO of Bank of America, and a whole bunch of other global leaders who are going to be part of this. So I started looking into this language of great reset because I found this very interesting. This idea of, well, we have to have this reset for the entire economy.
Not a restart. Not like turning the engines back on. A reset. But go
reset,
ahead.
Right. And I found this speech or this statement that Prince Charles, remember, who's co-hosting this event, gave in April for the 50th anniversary of Earth Day. And he said, I am confident that we can use this crisis, coronavirus, to reset our course by putting people and planet first. And then in the same statement later on, he says, rarely do we have the opportunity to pause, reflect, and reset our trajectory. I would encourage us all to reimagine the world we want and use all the levers we have at our disposal, knowing that each and every one of us has a vital role to play. And on the same day, the climate minister for New Zealand, James Shaw, wrote an article for The Guardian, which is a paper in the United Kingdom, that was titled, "The COVID-19 Crisis Creates a Chance to Reset Economies on a Sustainable Footing." And in that article, he said, this is indeed an unprecedented moment. What we do with it will determine the quality of life for billions of people, not just for the next few months or years, but for generations to come. And he encouraged people to imagine, quote, a future that is more equitable, more prosperous, and more innovative, and all within planetary limits. And he suggested that we, quote, make bold decisions for the collective good. talking again about a reset. So I think it's pretty clear that this meeting is like something out of a James Bond film or something. You're going to have all of these like villainous characters, right? Like it's the Illuminati or something like that.
Spectre.
Yeah, exactly. Gathering in some location. Actually, it's that the gathering is actually going to be virtual, but gathering all across Europe and all around the world, these incredibly wealthy, influential bankers, financial institution leaders, politicians, all deciding how they should reset the global economy and take advantage of this opportunity to put the planet first and to reshape our economy so that we don't go back to normal. When you start seeing things like collective good and global reset and all of this kind of stuff, you can't help but think, I mean, I know I'm like the socialism guy, so I see everything through the lens of socialism, but my God, if this doesn't sound like some sort of massive communist conspiracy, I don't know what does.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Right. And then some of the little details when we were talking about this morning, some of the details that were like a little eerie that were sticking out to me was like the idea that all of these sources are anonymous, right? All of these people that we're talking about in this original story, they're anonymous because they mentioned there's some line in there that like there's nothing set in stone yet, so you can't really comment specifically on like this meeting or anything.
Right.
Whereas like we know with all of our coverage of climate change related stuff that those like other global meetings that happened all the time, like the COP25s or whatever, those things are planned like a year and a half in advance. Like they're promoting that thing like 18 months in advance to try to get as much coverage of it as possible. Whereas this meeting, it's like June 3rd or something?
June 3rd, yeah.
So it's like, 2 weeks away? And like people are only kind of whispering about it in an anonymous fashion?
That's right. Yeah.
It makes me seem like the chairs are going to be like rigged with buttons where they press it and like fall into the fire if they don't say the right.
Oh yeah, you don't want the global reset? Get the heck out of here. Yeah, I know. I think you might be right. I mean, it's strange that they would even say any of this on the record to a reporter at all because the language is so ominous. But it just goes to show you the period of time that we're in. You can say this sort of thing right now, and nobody really looks the other way because you've got people like Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez saying other crazy things. You've got the world in just absolute chaos, and they feel like they can speak a little bit more freely than they ordinarily would. But this is a conspiracy theory, a theorist's dream. I mean, that's what this is.
Right.
It's just truly a remarkable story.
Well, Jim, what's your thoughts on this? I mean, maybe Justin and I are getting off the rails here a little bit. What do you think?
Well, I just ran into the kitchen to get this so I can make my tinfoil hat for the rest of this conversation. So I'll turn my microphone on mute so I can work on that so I can have it before the end of the podcast. But well, I mean, what was it? Did they call it the Great Reset? Is that what you said, Justin?
Yeah, it's a global reset.
Oh, global reset. Okay. Well, Great Leap Forward was already taken, so they couldn't use that one. What's? Oh my God! It's they just won't learn. I mean, I guess the best way to get power and to get power is to keep the people suppressed and keep them controlled. Capitalism and freedom is very inconvenient if you want to keep people controlled. That's why these are always, we have to do things differently. This is the time to rethink all the things we do. No, there's only one thing that works to keep people happy and prosperous. That's freedom and capitalism, period. Every other system that has been tried has led to tyranny and death. This is not up for debate. This is not an opinion. This is a historical fact. And I don't care how nicely, I don't care how meek and harmless Prince Charles seems. He's a dupe. They're using him as a front man for this, so it seems very, just very kind and very harmless. But this is always what happens is that the people are controlled. I mean, I can't put it back here to the coronavirus. The reason that people are rebelling now, they are just deciding, I am not going to comply. I am not going to do this anymore. I'm going to open up my church. Stop me. I'm going to open up my business. Come and stop me. I'm going to cut hair. There was a barber who cut hair. I think it was in Lansing, Michigan. He set up a chair to cut hair on the lawn of the State House. Come stop me.
Yeah.
Now, the freedom-loving people are not going to put up with this. This is all leftist fantasy. They can have their little virtual meeting on June 3rd. That's great. But the people are not going to put up with this. Not in the United States, not here. And that's why I really, this is a real test for us, this coronavirus test. And then you put these socialist plans right on top of them globally like this. They see this as an opportunity to finally do it. We're going to do it right this time. We're going to control everything you do, but you're going to be happy. And we're not going to hurt you or take away any of your stuff. Well, maybe we'll take away some of your stuff. We'll certainly take away most of your money because we have to redistribute that. Mm-hmm. And they're going to, this is where it always ends up. Socialism always ends in misery, economic misery, personal misery because you're unhappy, and then death. That is where this always ends up. And so let's keep an eye on this. Let's not let them get away with thinking that this is all, sunshine, flowers, and meadows, and we're all going to be just great in the future once we have the great reset to think about things like the planet and our fellow man.
Yeah.
Freedom and capitalism are the only two things that work. It's everything else. The Great Reset, reset it because we're not under freedom and capitalism right now. The Great Reset would be restoring our freedom and our economic freedom and our personal freedom. That's what a Great Reset is because it's the only thing that works.
Yeah, it's kind of a creepy thing, man. And, like back when the coronavirus stuff was first starting, it thinks that we're just going to be at home working from home for 2 weeks and then everything will be back to normal. Now we're like 2 months into this and this stuff is starting to seem a little bit more and more like there's laying down precedent.
Yeah.
And how we're trying to shift society to a much different thing than what we're used to.
Yeah. And I think... I think you should. Yeah, there you go, Jim.
Dude,
make that tinfoil.
That's going to be screenshotted forever.
That's more of a tinfoil bonnet. I got to work on it, I guess. I
think you got to work on it. You're going to have plenty of time when we get to the Great Reset, so don't worry about it. I think
I'll work on it in prison.
Yeah, I think that the two most important parts of this story. Number one, they've given it away. We knew this was going to happen, but they've now admitted it. They've now given it away. When the public health, there's a direct quote, when the public health emergency recedes, the obvious biggest crisis you have to address is climate change. Okay, yeah. There you go. That's the next big crisis. We all knew that it was coming. Everyone at the Heartland Institute knew that, but that's the next big crisis. They've admitted it. And they're going to use the same sort of strategies, the same justifications that they've used for this for the global climate change crisis that they're saying exists. I mean, that's now been totally given away. And I think that that's a really important point because it's not something we're just imagining. It's not a right-wing conspiracy. It's not something that we're reading into it. It's their plain words. That's what they're saying. And I think that the other really important part of it is that it's not just about climate change. It's about creating a new economy that focuses on equity. And all of this other language, the common good, the collective, all these phrases that they're using that are socialist, communist, Marxist phrases that have been around forever. And the language we don't have time to go through it, but the language of this op-ed written by the climate minister of New Zealand is Marxist language through and through. The whole thing is just full of Marxist language. It's so obvious that that's where he stands. Yeah. And I there's just no denying it. That is where we are headed. That is the next big crisis. That is the next big battleground for socialism, communism, personal freedom. They're going to come to you and say, you think COVID-19 was bad? Just wait until the oceans rise and swallow up a third of the United States. Yeah. Just wait till that happens. Then you're really going to be begging for government aid. That's how they're going to sell it.
And now this time, we're not going to have the pushback of saying, just think of how quaint the argument against the Green New Deal seems now, where it's that's going to cost $94 trillion over 10 years. It's that argument is done. We're done with that.
That's 10 years of spending now.
Yeah, we spend normal
years of spending.
We spend all of these trillions of dollars, printed all of these trillions of dollars to fight the coronavirus. Whereas if you were to go up to, a lefty, a Green New Deal person or whatever, they'd put the threat of the coronavirus here and the threat of climate change way up here. So it's it doesn't matter how much it costs. And we've already proven that it doesn't matter how much it costs.
They're also going to use without question the fact that the government is giving money to corporations and to businesses and all of this stuff. Well, if you've got money to give it to giant corporations, then you've got money to spend on the climate and the environment, ignoring entirely the fact that the reason we're giving money to corporations is because they shut the entire economy down. Yeah. So it's like they came to your house and burned the garage down, and now they're giving you money to rebuild the garage. And you're saying, well, if they're giving out money to rebuild the garage, then let's just buy everybody a house on the whole block. Why don't we just do that? I mean, it's totally insane, but it's completely predictable, and they've given it away. And it's not just government institutions. Who else is here? It's a bunch of bankers. It's well-connected business people are also involved in all of this. It isn't just the government. There's this whole, I don't want to use the word cabal, but I mean, in a sense, that's what it is. I mean, get the tinfoil hat back out. It's a cabal. I mean, there really is this massive group of people that are not massive. It's a small group of people that have massive amounts of power at the top of society that really are all on the same page when it comes to certain things. And this is one of those issues. For the next 20 years, we're going to be fighting for our lives to protect our personal freedom in the name, and they're going to be trying to take it away in the name of climate change. And that is going to be the political reality for the next 20 years at least. And we have to be prepared for it. And thank God we have an organization that is devoted to that. Yeah. I mean, I'm going to self-promote the Heartland Institute here, but the Heartland Institute is the only organization that has consistently been on top of this issue and made this connection and been focused on it for decades. It's the only one that's done that. And no one else is better positioned to fight this battle going forward over the next 15, 20 years for as long as this fight has to happen.
Yeah, and Justin and I are like streets ahead on this, to quote one of my favorite shows. We're streets ahead on this. We know their next like 5 or 6 steps. So we're going to continue to try to expose this in the effort to prevent it from ever happening or whatever, and educate people along the way. StoppingSocialism.com obviously is a good place to start looking at that. Videos we've also got on Facebook, facebook.com/StoppingSocialism. You can find us at pretty much all of the different social medias like that. But guys, that'll pretty much do it for this episode. Any last words of pearls of wisdom that you want to get off your chest before we sign off for today?
I'd appreciate it if listeners could maybe send me some patterns for making a proper tinfoil hat. I'm trying to maybe something like in a fedora or like a tricorner hat, like the
tricorner hat. That's the answer right there. Someone needs to come up with a tricorner hat, tinfoil hat. That's what we need.
Absolutely.
The title of this episode is Jim Wears a Tinfoil Hat, literally. All right, everybody. If you enjoyed this episode, please tune in every Friday for a new episode of the In the Tank podcast. If you like our show, please subscribe, write a review for us on iTunes. That'd be greatly appreciated. You could also find us on SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play, YouTube. You can see our beautiful faces on YouTube if you'd like to watch us and put some faces to the voices. If you'd like, you can follow us on Twitter at In the Tank Pod. Send us your comments, suggestions, questions, anecdotes, jokes at inthetankpodcast@gmail.com. Justin, where can the fine people find you?
At Justin T. Haskins on Facebook and Twitter. Look for the big, beautiful blue check mark. Still
and
there.
Jim Lakely, if people have some killer designs for tinfoil hats, where can they find you?
At Jay Lakely on Twitter, at Heartland Inst, also on Twitter, and go to heartland.org.
All right. Thank you.
And don't look for the big, beautiful blue check mark.
That's true.
It doesn't exist.
Not for me, unfortunately.
Thank you all for tuning in. We'll talk to you next week.